This scene is a calm autumn night. I've already stayed up way later than I need to, and the time is just around 12 a.m. I need to get up for work at 4 a.m., but there's a problem. I had just finished the third episode of Madoka Magica, and typically, I'm pretty good about calling it quits when it gets late, but by that point, I really just wanted to see how the story would progress, and so began the cycle of just one more episode. I went to work as a literal lifeless husk, but it was totally worth it, despite the absolutely horrid 8 hours ahead of me. And funny enough, in the time that it took to write this script, my podcast co-host PK also sacrificed his sleep in order to binge Madoka, and he values his sleep much more than I do. So, why did we overwrite our own basic intelligence and ideas of self-preservation to ignore our desire to sleep and make work the next day miserable just to watch the rest of an anime that isn't going to go anywhere if we took a break from it? Well, I did some research. I mean like actual research too, like academic papers and stuff, not just clicking the top link of whatever search engine you use. And what I discovered was that there is actually reasons based on facts that led me to spend the late hours of the night watching a magical girl anime. Madoka employs a multitude of different means of keeping you hooked to the screen brilliantly. And whether or not all of them were intentional or not, I really don't care, because this is what I believe to be the addictive nature of Madoka Magica. My original title and idea for this video involved the page-turning nature of the show and slowly evolved into what it is now, but the point still feels more than relevant enough to touch on. So, what does page-turning even mean? It's pretty much just right in the word itself. A page-turner would be used to describe a book that was so good that you couldn't stop reading it. Of course, we have more than just books these days, so the term can be applied outside of the original scope. So I guess first off, how do you even really pull off a page-turner? There's technically no correct answer, since the experience of one person isn't always going to equate to another, but as people, we are similar enough to where we can definitely take some stabs at it. The first answer a lot of people likely thought of was cliffhangers. Cliffhangers, of course, everyone knows as the ending of an episode or chapter, leaving the viewer with some sort of feeling of suspense. But now what if I told you that cliffhangers don't actually have an impact on your decision to continue watching something? Kind of. I'll get back to that in just a second, but first I do want to talk more about cliffhangers and why I believe Madoka Magica skirts along the line of a cliffhanger in a way that's absolutely to its benefit. The definition of cliffhanger is as such on dictionary.com. A melodramatic or adventure serial in which each installment ends in suspense in order to interest the reader or viewer in the next installment. Of course, the definition can also refer to just endings of episodes themselves, in which case the important word to focus on then would be the creation of suspense, which is defined on dictionary.com as a state or condition of mental uncertainty or excitement, as in awaiting a decision or outcome, usually accompanied by a degree of apprehension or anxiety. Take note of the as in awaiting a decision or outcome part of the definition as we take a look through the end of Madoka episodes and the movie to determine if there's actually any cliffhangers involved based on these definitions. Alright, stick with me here because there is a purpose to all of this. Alright, episode 1, at the end of the episode we get what I believe to be one of the few things that actually fits the bill of a cliffhanger based on the definition that we're looking for in Madoka Magica. And even then it's pretty close, and I was tempted to cope and say that it wasn't one, but it's probably more fair to say that it is, especially at the beginning stages of the story. We see Mommy scare off the witch while protecting Madoka, Sayaka, and Kyubi, and that also gets Homura to retreat as well, very shortly after Kyubi requests that Madoka and Sayaka become magical girls. This does fit a cliffhanger due to the nature of the ending. We are awaiting that decision or outcome from the non-magical duo to decide whether or not they should accept their request. Like I said, it's close because, you know, we don't really get to see their reactions, and this isn't really the type of cliffhanger that's absolutely going to hook people, but it does fit the definition we're going for. Now, episode 2 is where my narrative and agenda really start to set in with the no cliffhangers idea. We go through the episode and acquire a considerable amount of information in regards to the world, learning about both witches and grief seeds and how they impact the things around them. The episode has an end that doesn't really meet either requirements we set for ourselves, as Madoka was just drawing what her magical girl outfit would look like. There's no decision being pressed or outcome that we're apprehensive to see the results of. The third episode is what got me and the majority of people who watch Madoka hooked more than anything else, and it also is very much not a cliffhanger. A lot of anime probably would have tried to end the episode with Mommy being killed, but the show let that moment happen, then saved Madoka and Sayaka, and they also killed the witch. There's no outcome to chase after and no decision to be made. You can try and say that the choice of what Madoka and Sayaka do next could constitute as a decision, but I feel that it's more than removed enough from the event at hand that it doesn't really match what we're looking for. Now, episode 4 does get a bit close, but I feel like we stay just outside the range of a cliffhanger, though I'll have to defend this one a bit more. We see Sayaka has made her decision to become a magical girl, and after saving Madoka, we cut to Kyoko declaring that she wants the city as her own territory, and declares that she will kick Sayaka's ass in order to take it. Now, here you're really left with more of an oh fuck moment more than anything, but I do want to take into account how the great filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock once famously made his own declaration of what suspense entails. Mystery is when the spectator knows less than the characters in the movie, and suspense is when the spectator knows more than the characters in the movie. There is a distinct difference between suspense and surprise, and yet many pictures continually confuse the two. I'll explain what I mean, Hitchcock once said. We are now having a very innocent little chat. Let's suppose that there is a bomb underneath this table between us. Nothing happens, and then all of a sudden, boom. There's an explosion. The public is surprised, but prior to the surprise, it has seen an absolutely ordinary scene of no special consequence. Now, let us take a suspenseful situation. The bomb is underneath the table and the public knows it, probably because they have seen the anarchists placed it there. The public is aware that the bomb is going to explode at 1 o'clock and that there is a clock in the decor. The public can see that it is 1:45. In these conditions, the same innocuous conversation becomes fascinating because the public is participating in the scene. The audience is longing to warn the characters on the screen, you shouldn't be talking about such trivial matters. There's a bomb beneath you and it's about to explode. In the first case, we have given the public 15 seconds of surprise at the moment of the explosion. In the second, we have provided them with 15 minutes of suspense. The conclusion is that whenever possible, the public must be informed, except when the surprise is a twist. That is, when the unexpected ending is, in itself, the highlight of the story. Because Kyoko is something unknown to Sayaka, there is room to say that you could be comparing Kyoko to basically a bomb in the Alfred Hitchcock situation proposal. She's there, you know she's there, and she could explode at any moment, is what I would say if the episode was still going. Where I feel like you can scoot around here is that the situation for Hitchcock suspense is vastly different to the situation for pretty much any serialization at the end of an episode, unless of course the bomb has been ticking and then the episode ends before you can see any explosion. The difference here is that Kyoko isn't under any table, so to speak. She's far enough away, and while you know she will be involved later, you aren't apprehensive of the moment at hand. Or maybe you are, I don't know. I'm quoting Alfred Hitchcock in a video about magical girl anime. I think we'll be okay just taking what I say and running with it, right? Episode 5, Saved by the Bell on this one, as rather than ending on Kyoko almost killing Sayaka or Kyubi trying to gaslight Madoka into becoming a magical girl, we get Homura that steps in right at the end. Now there's no decision or outcome for us to await because Madoka's decision was stopped and so was the battle at hand. Yeah, episode 6, this right here, probably the episode that sealed my fate for the night. A crazy twist in the world and how we understand its workings with the reveal of the soul gem's true nature. We avoid a cliffhanger once again, however, as the outcome is resolved with the gem being returned by Homura to Sayaka, and she subsequently comes back to the world of the living. It was definitely a high anxiety moment, but doesn't quite fit the definition we're looking for because that situation does resolve. Episode 7's a bit of an awkward one because I think there's equal argument for both sides. You can certainly say it would be a cliffhanger because Sayaka's fight isn't over, but in my personal opinion, it's pretty obvious she's gonna win it. I think it's more reasonable to say that we do reach an outcome in regards to Sayaka's mental state. She has clearly lost it at this point, and this episode is much more about her decline as opposed to whether or not she wins this one specific battle against a witch. I'm going to say not a cliffhanger to further my narrative. Seems fair enough. Yeah, I'm not even going to try to weasel out of this one. Episode 8 for sure is a cliffhanger, and probably the easiest to zero in on example-wise. Sayaka seems to be turning into a witch based on what the words of Kyubi are, and you don't get shown exactly what happens to her in that moment, while also being worried about what's going on with Kyoko at the same time, who is right next to her. What decision will Kyoko make in response to that situation? What could the outcome possibly be? Both the questions are being hit and most certainly come pre-packaged with a feeling of anxiety. Now, with episode 9, we are back to the non-cliffhangers. Kyoko takes herself and Sayaka out at the same time, and shortly after we have a bit of a quick discussion between Kyubei and Homura. It cuts it maybe a little close because the anime ended with Kyubei saying that the city's fate rests with Madoka. A cliffhanger could have potentially been argued just for the ambiguity, but Homura immediately shuts him down with the declaration to not let that happen, so we just avoid the situation to begin with. Episode 10, no cliffhanger, as we just end on a declaration from Homura again. The episode itself was always going to be difficult to cliffhanger regardless, because we get a surprise flashback that shows Homura's past and everything that she has been through in order to attempt to save Madoka from this fate of becoming a magical girl. Now, our third cliffhanger comes with the end of this episode, as while it does seem like Madoka has made a firm decision, we technically don't know what it is, and we're also left to wait and see what the outcome of the battle against Walpurgisnacht will look like. So yeah, it's a cliffhanger. Okay, episode 12, it's the literal end of the anime besides the film's continuation, so there's literally no room for a cliffhanger here. I mean, there kind of is, but pretty plain and simple that Madoka sacrifices herself to become Magical Girl Jesus as the world resets and a lot changes. You could count the end credit scene, I guess, but I don't think it really fits the definition we set, and it's extremely abstract, and so I can barely tell what the fuck is going on, even though I've watched the movie afterward. Thankfully, this movie technically doesn't end on a cliffhanger, but it gives us something a bit more open-ended with the million ways that it could go. It would have really sucked for Homura to just rewrite the world and us not see anything after that for about 10 years and then just nothing added to the series. We end the movie with Homura keeping Madoka from remembering her true purpose, and the end credit scene is just Shaft being Shaft, so there's not really a lot to take away from that. I'd say we avoid a cliffhanger based on our definitions here. Okay, so after that entire escapade, we've come to the conclusion that 3 of the 12 episodes are cliffhangers and that the movie also doesn't contain one. So with the vast majority of Madoka not containing cliffhangers, I can start to explain why I wanted to bring this up in the first place. An academic research paper done in collaboration between the universities of Freiburg and Lucerne aimed to study the effects of cliffhangers on the excitement while watching, enjoyment of the series, and the intention to keep watching. Link in the description to the study itself if you want to read it yourself, and same for any other studies I use in this video. I do want to point out that this study mainly relates to binge watching as opposed to weekly serialization. If you are getting cliffhangers during a weekly watching experience, you will likely continue to come back. Madoka Magica No is over a decade old at this point, and I'm mainly looking into my own experience, so this study still applies. Now, I'm not going to walk you through this entire paper, so I'm going to highlight the key points. Participants in the experiment watched 3 different types of series. One was documentary style, one was drama without cliffhangers, and one was a drama with cliffhangers. The documentary and drama without cliffhangers served to be models for shows with simply an unfinished narrative. In the first hypothesis of the 3, they wanted to see if the drama with cliffhangers would bring more excitement to the board than the other 2. It was found that excitement was highest when cliffhangers are present, followed by a lack of cliffhangers, and finally the documentary style presentation. However, it's important to note that the differences between these groups wasn't actually that significant. Further studies into a multitude of factors revealed that in the end, the highest level excitement comes from finishing the documentary, then the drama with cliffhangers, and finally the lowest level was lack of cliffhangers. The experiment then dove into the study of overall enjoyment, with an added stipulation of trying to look into people who feel the need for cognitive or sensation seeking. Basically, does the show at hand actually entertain a certain group of people more than it does with someone who doesn't really need that stimulation? The hypothesis was that cliffhangers would add to the enjoyment, especially for those who need that stimulation. This turned out to be false in reality. While the dramas with and without cliffhangers both performed better in terms of enjoyment than the documentary, neither performed better than the other, and it was also found that shows with cliffhangers didn't see any increase in enjoyment, even from the people who desire cognitive stimulation and sensation. Now, the third and final hypothesis they posed was that they believed cliffhangers would increase the viewer's intention to continue a series, especially with those who felt the general need for closure in what they watch. What they found was that while there was a dramatic increase when it came to intention to keep watching both dramas versus the documentary, the cliffhanger version did not see an increase of intention to continue. So basically, after all of that, the conclusion is that the cliffhangers don't actually have a significant impact on if someone decides to keep watching something. Keep in mind that once again, this study was looking into the binge model, and that the test subjects had to stop watching at some point, so there would need to be a different study to see if people were inclined to just continue the entire thing right then and there based on the cliffhangers, though the preliminary findings seem to suggest that it likely doesn't matter. What they did find is that cliffhangers do increase excitement levels, which can actually mess with your ability to go to sleep. So even if I did decide to stop, depending on the episode, it might have been difficult to get to bed regardless. But now that I've described the study, we can actually talk about why any of that matters with Madoka and my point. We already determined that the vast majority of the episodes do not end with a cliffhanger, and that cliffhangers don't actually seem to point towards any actual intent to watch in a binge format. And given how young the study I used is, I wanted to dig a bit deeper on my own. So what I did next was make my own hypothesis. I can't actually prove anything since I'm not going to make a study of my own, but I can speculate based on other information. My guess is that it's actually better for a show to end their episodes without a cliffhanger, but to instead focus on keeping the viewer engaged in what's happening near the end. In order to lend some sort of credence to this idea, I found another paper that researched the link between engagement and satisfaction. The study did occur in school classrooms when it came to learning, so nothing to do with watching TV. However, I feel like we as people are simple enough that this data can be extrapolated into other areas as well. The study came from a collaboration between Center for Higher Education Research and Scholarship Imperial College London, Department of Geography, Birkbeck, University of London, and Surrey Institute of Education. This research is far simpler than the previous one, however, I'll spare you the details on it once again and just get right to the information we actually need in the conclusion. The conclusion that the study came to after looking at a number of variables of engagement was that the more engaged students were in fact more satisfied, but they also ended up finding more satisfied students were also more engaged, so it really flows both ways. If you can engage someone, they will be satisfied, and if you can prove to satisfy someone, they will actively be more engaged. It seems like a simple concept, and it really is, but we did just discover that it's possible that cliffhangers have far less of an impact than you think, so anything is possible and you may as well just look into it. Now, I could stop the video right there and be satisfied with everything that I came across, but I'm already 3,300 words into this thing, so I may as well try and add any more weight to my hypothesis here. Of course, Madoka Magica may not engage everyone who watches it, but I can however look into the factors that Madoka puts on the table that can lead to higher engagement rates. With that being said, let's take an even deeper dive into the other details of Madoka Magica. Well, we've already talked about cliffhangers, so I've picked a few new factors for me to look into, and they are what I believe make Madoka Magica compelling to watch. These three things are the subversion of expectations, characters, and art style. If there's any one thing that Madoka Magica is most famous for, it's the ever-evolving plotline and world that surrounds it. Even for people who haven't actually seen the show, its general reputation is that of a cutesy-looking magical girl anime that is actually extremely dark in reality. That alone will get some people interested in at least trying it, but not everyone. And those who do start the anime will be met with something much more than it's just actually pretty dark plot twists that you see pretty often. The world of Madoka Magica is constantly being revealed to us in different ways, but all through one medium of expression, and that's simple changes at different levels of impact to our characters. While I'm not going to go down the entire list again like I did in the previous part, every single episode in the anime has some sort of significant information that changes how we view the events in the world we're witnessing. 3 of these in particular are spread out in such a way that every few episodes you are met with something that changes the entire way you think about everything you've seen so far. It may confirm anxieties you had, or it may just be something unforeseen. Now, none of the plot twists in Madoka are particularly complex, but do they really need to be? As a criticism towards a lot of shows, the word simple gets thrown around a lot more than it probably should. I understand why. It's a word with a negative connotation that is easily understood by anyone who sees it, but in reality, simplicity is just the starting line for bigger introspection into the way something is written. You can denote a work of writing as simple, but to determine if that simplicity warrants any critique, it's good to look at everything that surrounds it. Does that simplicity lead to something? Really, you can break down any story as simple. Vinland Saga, it's just a story about a boy who's brought up on hate and later realizes the error of his ways and vows to change. Regardless, the execution of this simple plotline brings a mass appreciation from fans of the series all around the world. Why are people drawn to stories with simple developments? Not that more complex issues can't also be appreciated, but as we discussed with the cliffhanger ordeal, more complex stories are likely to be more compelling to people on a weekly basis. This is something I mainly inferred from a study that I looked into for this part: interesting things and curious people, exploration and engagement as transient states and enduring strengths. This study was conducted in collaboration between the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and George Mason University. There were a multitude of things looked at in this comprehensive paper of ideas about what drives people to be interested. The theory looks at but states the rebuttal of the concept of situational interests, which listed many factors such as concreteness, coherence, ease of comprehension, vividness, and novelty as the ones that lead to interest. Situational interest models theorize that everyone would be interested in these factors. However, everyone is unique in their own way, of course, so no study could truly ever determine something that makes everyone interested, as the paper states. But we can at least look at some of the commonalities to see what gets the average person interested. The paper came to at least one general conclusion: that at the level of momentary experience, interest is rooted in appraising an event as new yet comprehensible. New, unfamiliar things that stretch one's knowledge creates a feeling of interest and its corresponding motivation to learn, understand, understand and explore. Stretch one's knowledge meaning things that deepen your understanding as opposed to stretching the limits of knowledge. The simple yet compounding changes of the madoka world are easy to understand, but typically bring about new questions so that the viewers are continuously wanting to learn what may come next, practically replacing what you would typically perceive as the role of a cliffhanger. The things I would consider the main twist of madoka would be, obviously, the death of Mommy practically switched the entire anime's atmosphere. It's easy to comprehend what happened and leads to unfamiliar territory, as the viewers are now likely intrigued at what direction the anime will now take with her gone and the girls traumatized. The reveal of the soul gems being the true body of the magical girls while their physical bodies are simply husks, once again is easy to comprehend, and it solidifies the true nature of Kyubi as sinister, which is something you could infer from the previous events, but this would now lead viewers to be curious about what else this little shit was hiding from even some of the most seasoned magical girls. Finally, at least for the TV series, Homura being from a different timeline had already been speculated by Kyubey, but the extent to which this was true is something that hadn't been known. Her true motivations being revealed and the thing that was stopping her all this time finally being put into visuals leaves the viewer with the burning question of what can she do against this thing, as the viewers now move forward to figure that question out. I may as well mention that much like the lack of true cliffhangers, Madoka's writing during the movie also continues to implement generally easy to comprehend twists that greatly reshape what we understand about the working Madoka magical world. They interest the viewer, engage the viewer, and if the viewer continues to be satisfied, they will continue this cycle of interest, engagement, and satisfaction. Now, in my personal opinion, not one from an academic study or anything of that sort, I believe that characters are the most important things in regard to a story and how it resonates in the mind of people who consume said story. Stories, worlds, and characters can all be simple or complex, but regardless, the thing that is always in our face is going to be a character. They're the ones going through a simple or complex plot. They are the ones traversing a simple or complex world, and they are the ones that ultimately you are going to be trying to sympathize with. Whether or not you relate to them, they are your projection point for investment. At first, this was going to be a character-by-character look at different archetypes and how we may attach ourselves to each of them, but I ended up down a different psychological rabbit hole instead. Love for, of, through characters in fiction is an excerpt written by Enrico Palandri, and while it isn't a study, it does reference different parts of psychology and how we attach and distance ourselves when it comes to fictional characters. I'll kickstart this with the quote they pulled from Sigmund Freud when discussing this. "We have so far left the writer to paint the conditions needed to love. That determines how we choose the object of our love. The writer can rely on certain qualities to succeed, the ability to empathize with the secret thoughts of others, and the courage to talk about his own unconsciousness. However, his task is limited by the need to please, emotionally and aesthetically, and provoke emotion. Therefore, he cannot reproduce reality, but he needs to isolate certain parts and avoid unpleasant truths. This is what we call poetic license." What this is basically saying in short is that you can't be too realistic with the characters that you're writing. This makes sense as you want to be able to have people sympathize with a character regardless of whether or not they've been through a similar situation. You're pretty much camping in the middle and hoping that you can strike a chord with people who relate and people who need to put conscious effort into attempting to relate. I'm sure I could talk about all the characters and how this works with them in some regard, but because I spent way too long writing the script at times, let's just focus on three, with those being Madoka, Sayaka, and Koko. Sayaka is probably the easiest to start with, as despite the name of the anime including Madoka, you really follow Sayaka as the main character more than you'd ever expect. Her story probably strikes home for a number of people watching, but as we discussed, the fictional circumstances around it allow for the viewer to keep a little distance when they get attached. Being a magical girl is far from the super noble thing that she thought it was, and her desire to be a hero falters when faced with her own dilemma of feeling jealousy towards her friend as she asks out the person Sayaka made the wish for to begin with. Jealousy, especially from romantic issues, is obviously something that would be easy to relate to, but it's interesting that as close as that comes to reality, the way that emotion interacts with the other side of her story is a different side of the same coin. Her innate desire to want to care for others clashes with the reality of being a magical girl, as her survival depends on the downfall of others, be it innocent people or just other magical girls. The stress behind her duties and collapsing personal life leads her down a dark path that would be unfathomable to a regular person. Anyone who did sympathize with her simple boy troubled plight before would be taken aback as her soul gem filled with darkness and the transformation into which occurred. Back to talking about different sides of the same coin, Kyoko is literally just Sayaka but without the hero complex. Her wish was also in the interest of someone else, but when it failed in the end, as all wishes for others tend to do, she took a different approach to the issue. The pain and frustration led her to have a somewhat twisted personality wherein she only lived for herself. Stealing wasn't beneath her at that point, and her whole introduction was built around her desire to bully Sayaka out of the area, or even kill her if she had to, in order to secure an easy-to-farm witch hotspot. Personality alone probably puts most people off from relating to her on that level, but the reveal of exactly how her wish went wrong is the point where people can start to relate and also get off that train at the same time. Finally, with Madoka, she almost feels like a vessel for the viewers as the show continues to run. As it gets harder and harder to relate to the characters due to the anime's developments, she stays as the one normal girl for nearly the entire duration of the anime. Really, I could have talked about this with the subversion of expectations as well, because for something called Madoka Magica, Madoka doesn't do a whole lot of magicaing. She's the most fleshed out character in regards to her interactions with others, a very down-to-earth relationship with her family and close friends around her. She's always looking out for the best interest of everyone involved, regardless of how she might feel about them personally, even wanting to avoid fighting Kyoko despite her starting the confrontations. There isn't a person who can watch the anime and not relate to her on some level, because her character is the easiest to project onto, as it's the closest to reality, as well as just being relatable by trying to make things work out in an extremely difficult situation, which I'm sure we've all been through. Now, of course, we have to circle back around to the point where she can't be too realistic, so I think becoming magical girl Jesus right at the end pretty much solves that issue. Some people might be thinking that just liking or relating to a character isn't going to be enough to get someone actually attached to the anime as a whole. And they're probably right in some capacity on that, but it helps way more than I think you'd actually expect. I have a content creator friend by the name of Psychoculturist, aka Ed, who came onto my podcast and discussed a number of things, and most importantly for this situation, some psychological concepts surrounding anime. Something that he brought up as wanting to study further into as his psychologist himself was the way that people attach themselves to certain pieces of media. Have you ever lightly criticized something and gotten a lot of heat for it online, even though you weren't really being all that harsh? Well, what Ed brings up is that a piece of media being held dear to someone could actually lead them to take criticism against it as a personal attack. This could be because it helped them on a personal level in some way, and so any attacks levied on it, they do truly view as an attack on their person, even if they don't realize it themselves. Getting attached to a character in Madoka, or any anime for that matter, is going to increase the chances that you're going to end up liking that anime, as long as the actual content isn't so, egregiously terrible that it bypasses your mental subconscious. I mean, come on. We all have that one character in that one series that you know in your heart isn't really as good as you say it is, but you gas it up anyway. It's a concept that hasn't really been studied, but it's one that makes so much sense when you just look at how fragile critical thinking type conversations can be. It really makes you wonder just how far it can extend as well. Some works from Studio Shaft can get a little funky with the art, namely the Monogatari series, but that out-of-the-ordinary art style is also present in the Madoka series. Art is one of those things that we as humanity have always been interested in. Hell, the anime we watch is just art drawn in a way that simulates movement. It's all around us, and it's no surprise that we are also more drawn to unique pieces more than anything. And to say the least, Madoka has a unique style to it. The background sets to begin with are already eye-catching enough, with Madoka's parents just having a bunch of chairs spread across the room for no reason. Not to mention their bathroom is literally just made of fucking mirrors. Like, what the hell did the architect smoke before doing this thing? As random as they are, the backgrounds do tend to be pretty minimalistic as a whole, actually, which makes the first Witch's Labyrinth appearance that much more striking. Being sent from a dark, random back room at a mall into this zany animation style is jarring, but it really catches your attention. The animation style can be referred to as the UPA style, which generally consists of flat and abstract pieces put together. Some Western cartoons like Powerpuff Girls have taken inspiration from this old style, but Madoka uses it in earnest by spicing up the typical animation style with those cutouts. So what does using this abstract style do for the anime? Well, you guessed it. It attracts the general viewer to stay attached to the anime. Now, this one is certainly the least shocking reveal ever. Really, just having cute anime girls in a complex situation is going to be enough to get a lot of people reeled in, but I went in and did the research anyway that confirms that this fact is actually the case. The study preference for for abstract art according to thinking styles and personality by Mark C. Gridley from Heidelberg University looks into this concept. You don't actually have to go far into the paper to find the answer that I was looking for, and while I'm not going to simply just pluck the answer from the abstract and move on, I will read it out before talking about it a bit more. Abstract art is preferred over representational art among individuals who enjoy novelty, ambiguity, and dissonance and are particularly sensation-seeking, open-minded, field-independent thinkers, and are particularly low in desire for a simple order. Now, there were a lot of personality quirks listed there, but the most important thing is sensation-seeking. Even if someone's personality isn't always to be seeking out sensations when watching an anime or any TV show for that matter, it's generally pretty safe to assume that you're looking to get something out of what you're watching. Of course, someone could just put it on for the noise, but that's not the majority of viewers. For me, when I'm watching an anime, I'm seeking out engagement with that piece of media. Now, not everyone is going to do it like that either, but this is certainly why someone like me would get hooked into madoka. I'm seeking to think about things during my watch, seeking sensation. Action is a thing that tends to draw a lot of people to anime. It's that sensation of the adrenaline of the fight. So even without thinking about it much, that group could also likely classify as sensation-seeking. Attraction to ambiguity and attraction to perpetual complexity may also be consistent with desire for high levels of sensation. Therefore, it would be consistent with the fact that sensation-seeking has been found to be positively correlated with preference for complexity in pictures, and that a liking for abstract expressionist art has been found to be positive correlated with sensation-seeking. I did focus a lot on the abstract nature of the art itself, and there are definitely more rabbit holes one could go down in regards to it. Madoka is an anime that tends to get analyzed like a motherfucker when it comes to things like symbolism, which I'm sure there are countless videos on, and I'm going to spare you that time and not go into it because if you're interested in that type of stuff, find someone else. Once you finish the last bit of this video though, of course. Like I said, most everything on here likely isn't intentional in any capacity, at least from a psychological perspective. I'm sure the meeting rooms for stuff like the art style were just closer to, oh yeah, that would look pretty cool, and much less, wahaha, we have devised the perfect scheme in order to trap most viewers into watching our TV anime original. And for what it's worth, it did look pretty cool. Obviously, with the length of this video alone, you can tell I adore this anime. It's truly just such a gripping experience, and learning about some of the deeper reasons as to why it might get entranced into finishing it as quickly as I did was pretty fun. Even if it did kill the channel for a little while because of the scale of this type of video in comparisons to other things I've done, yes, it was certainly this video alone that got me to go MIA. Definitely not Lethal Company, Valorant, and Minecraft over the course of a few months, definitely not that. Anyway, thank you so much for somehow making it this far into the video. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe. It would mean the world for this video to do well, considering the time put into it, and also numbers going up feels pretty nice. Feel free to join the Discord if you want to talk anime with me and other server members, and eventually more once I actually get that thing going more. Also consider becoming a member if you want to support the channel and gain access to some extra perks. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Goodbye.